After we've cropped, straightened and adjusted exposure, colour, clarity and contrast, we're done. Well, not always. Here's an image you may have seen before. It's not uncommon to have a few dust spots to deal with. And there's likely to be a few more dust spots here that we can't yet see. Plus, there are other distractions too. These days we have quite a number of ways to deal with spots and blemishes, both in Adobe Camera Raw and in Photoshop, but here I'd like to remain within Adobe Camera Raw. The tools we need for these repairs can be found at this icon from the toolbox at the top right. We have three tools in here. We have the clone tool, the healing brush, and the content aware remove. The clone and the healing tools both work very similar, so I'm going to sidestep the clone tool because I very rarely use it. Now when we select any of these tools, we'll see that shown to us with a brush. The brush can be adjusted in size via the square bracket keys to the right of the letter P on the keyboard. Now this shortcut is one worth remembering because it not only works here in Adobe Camera Raw, but exactly the same in Photoshop and Lightroom too for any of the brushes we may use. Now let's begin by dealing with the dust spots in the sky because they're generally pretty easy to do and we use the healing brush for that. But first of all, I'm going to go to my zoom tool down at the bottom right and select that, because I want to click and drag to bring this up to about 100%. Now if you want to go directly to 100%, you can right click and choose zoom to, and we can select it. Using the space bar, the cursor changes to the hand and I can drag my image to the top right because we need to see the spots in that area. So now I can select my healing brush. But when I go back onto the picture surface, I still appear to have the zoom tool. If that happens to you, just touch the escape key and you'll be back to your brush. Now I said before that we can see some of the dust spots on the sensor of our camera. Here it appears I've got a very small hair, but I can see a couple of dust spots, one here and one here. Well, we do have a way to be able to see them much more clearly. If we go to this little box here, visualize spots, you can see it changes the image dramatically, but it does allow us to see the spots a lot more easily. We do have a slider as well, so we can show them up more or less in various parts of the image. So now all I need to do is to use those square bracket keys to drop the size of my brush down, just paint over that one, and it's done. I can see one there, I can see one there, and I think we had one around here. Now that's a little more difficult to see, so I may wait until we turn this visualize spots off. But just touching the space bar, I can click and drag and I can move along the image. There is definitely a dust spot. They do look just like little donuts, ring donuts, so I can touch that one and that one. There's one there. I'll make my brush a little smaller. I don't want to impact on the rigging of the boat. And we need to go across this fairly carefully just to make sure we pick them all up. But in the interest of speed, I'll go through a little bit quicker. There's certainly one there, and I think there was one in the middle here, that one there. So now I'm going to turn the visualize spots off, and I'll go back to the top. There's the one that I was having trouble with, and I can just see another one there as well. So I'll just touch that and that. I'm going to hit Control 0. That'll fit the image on screen, so all of those have been completed. Now at any time we can tick the box to show the overlays. Why would we want to do that? Well, if we notice that one of the repairs we did we're not happy with, I could select it, I could delete it and have another go, or I can even adjust it. But what we're going to do next is to have a go at those coloured buoys in the water, because they are quite distracting. We can also use the V key to toggle the overlays for any of these three tools on and off, and you'll see that that may come in handy when we switch to the next tool in a few moments. Now I'm choosing to repair quite large areas here, and sometimes that can be a little more difficult, but of course it's going to be a bit more interesting, I think, to see it done. So the first thing I'm going to do here is to enlarge the image to something around 200. I think we could even go to 300%. If you have difficulty selecting the zoom tool, which I seem to here, here's another option where we can jump to a larger size, hold the space bar and click and drag. Let's start with this one first, and I'm going to select the Content Aware Remove. Once again, we're working with a brush. Now sometimes we may choose to increase the brush size and cover the entire problem with one click. And there you can see it's done a pretty good job, but it's missed a little bit right at the top there. But of course there's no problem when we're working with these tools to just give it another touch in that area, or even 3 or 4 if it needs it. It only takes a few seconds to completely eliminate that orange buoy. Now let's move over to the red one. I'll make the brush a little bit bigger. We can paint with the brush as well. Let me give you an example of that. Now, if that didn't work too well, if we touch that V key, and now you can see why the V key can be handy, I can click inside here and move this slightly up and down to get a different effect. Now I think it worked pretty well straight away, so I'm going to touch the V key again. Now we're looking at this very large, and if we were being very critical, we've got a little bit around the bottom of that repair which maybe we can just about see. But of course all we've got to do is make the brush a little smaller, maybe give it 1 or 2 touches, and we would certainly be able to cover that up. And we also have to bear in mind that when we hit Ctrl 0, that repair's pretty well done. Now I can't state with any certainty which tool is required for what repair, because it depends so much on the image content, what we're actually trying to repair. What I'm going to do here is to zoom in once again. Let's go to 200%, hold the space bar, and we'll see if we can deal with the last of these. Now let me make my brush just about big enough to cover that, and we'll see if we can do it in 1 click. Now that's not worked too bad at all, and I think we would get away with that repair. One thing to remember when you're using these brushes is that if I were to select the healing brush now, it would change my repair. See, the repair's changed, and it would do the same with the clone. But it worked well the first time, so I'm going to take it back to this option. If you get a repair that looks pretty good but doesn't quite make it, try the refresh. Sometimes that works a treat too. So all I've got to do now is probably the one that's most difficult here, because it's a little bit of a problem given that it's got this line running right the way through where the water changes quite a bit. But I'm going to stay with the same tool. I'm going to drop my brush down, and I'm going to paint down because we've got a reflection there. Now I'm going to touch that V key because I can move this up and down, and I could get a pretty good result. But you can see how that's highlighted. If I wasn't happy with this, a touch of the delete key and it's gone. Now I said I wasn't going to use the clone tool. I've changed my mind. I'm going to select the clone tool. You'll notice it's got a selection for size and feather and opacity. Generally I have the feather Well, I have to adjust that depending on what I see when I make the repair. The opacity stays at 100%, the size, square bracket keys again. Click and drag. Now you can see the difference here. With the clone tool, it's sampling from this area to repair this, but it's not working quite right. So what I can do is click inside here and I can move it. And in fact, sometimes if we need to move it very, very slightly, we can use the up, down arrow keys to actually nudge it. And when I touch the V key, you can see it's done a pretty good repair there. Now you may be able to see just the edge of it. So maybe I can just tweak up the feather a little bit, just to soften out the edge, and it will blend in nicely with the reflections in the water from the far bank. I'm going to hit Control 0 and say, I think we've got a result here. So I suppose it would be reasonable to say that the clone tool here has worked better because we're working on an area that has a sharp line between two distinctive parts of the water. And it works well where we've got to line up lines in the content of our image. Generally speaking, the other two work better when we're talking about clouds and maybe water and other areas of our images. I am aware of how many amateurs find dust spots tedious. But in Bridge we demonstrated in video 5 how edits can be made on one image and then copied and pasted to another image, or in fact many images. So within Bridge we can copy the healing brush edits either on their own, isolated, or maybe mixed in with a number of other edits like the image we can see here. Now all we need to do is to right click, we select develop settings and copy those settings. Here I've only got another 4 images, but we could have 44 or 444. When I right click and return to develop settings and paste settings, we've got all of the edits we would normally have, but I can also tick to include the healing brush. So when I click OK, I get all of the other edits, but any dust in the sky that I've fixed with the healing brush is also completed automatically for me. Whenever we can carry out any edits at all, and we can speed up the process without compromising quality, we should grasp that with both hands. I'll see you in the next video.